Hi, everyone, and welcome to this breakout session for Atmosphere Live. I'm Julie Pearl, Director of Cloud Developer Relations and Partner Engineering at Google, and I'll be your moderator today as we talk about the monumental ways that IT is transforming business and the ways that IT is transforming itself in the process. We have a great panel lined up for the next 45 minutes, including Google CIO Ben Freed and Brandon Williams, who handles Google Apps for the state of Colorado. And with me here are Brent Hoag from Briggs and Stratton and Scott Hendrick from Scott's Miracle-Gro, who I'll be chatting with in just a moment. Brent and Scott, welcome to Atmosphere Live.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we would love to hear from you as well. So if you have a question for one of our panelists, just log in and enter it at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get to as many of your questions as we can. But I want to kick off with Brent and talk about one of the biggest opportunities for cloud technologies, which is in traditional areas such as manufacturing. The manufacturing sector has been around for hundreds of years. In fact, it constitutes the 8th largest economy in the world. And yet, with our changing economy, every single manufacturer today is trying to figure out how to stay competitive for the next 100 years. You know, Brent, you use cloud tools to change a traditional top-down way of working into one that fosters collaboration as well as innovation in ways that, we just couldn't even imagine. So tell us a little bit about your company.
Sure, thank you, Julie. Briggs and Stratton has been making gas-powered engines for more than 100 years. We started making lawnmowers in the United States and have now grown to be a global leader with over 7,000 employees. A lot of the engines we make go on products you'd probably recognize, like lawnmowers, snowblowers, pressure washers, and generators. So chances are, if you have one of those, it's powered by Briggs and Stratton.
So how do you go about making such a major technology shift, such as a move to Google, without disrupting this kind of stable and proven operation?
Right, it is a challenge in the manufacturing sector because it is so entrenched, like you're saying. So we really have 3 keys to our success. The first one is having executive leadership and support. The second one is having a catalyst, such as a test group. And the third is a quick rollout. So for the first key, we're really fortunate with Briggs and Stratton to have a CEO who understands that in today's global economy, that success is really driven by continuously improving communication, collaboration, and innovation, both internally and externally within our company. The second point is really having a catalyst to drive the innovation. So in our case, we use our IT group as a test group, and what we did is we gave them Google for Work, and we challenged them to see what we could do with it. So I think this is a very critical group to have, such as a test group or even for a rollout, is that catalyst that can use the tools. And really it's about giving good people those great tools like Google and encouraging them to do amazing things with that, empowering them to do that. And we know that, probably the same is true in your company, Scott, that some are early adopters and they dive right in, and other customers will hang back, and that's okay. Because our model is really to work with every customer in a unique way. And we know that they're all differentiated, and we help them to understand how to use the tools and embed them into their everyday work. And then the third key is really the quick rollout. And for our case, it's really using that spark of the catalyst and having it spread across the company as quickly as possible.
So after you gave them Google for Work, what happened next?
Really what happened next was the amazing thing. So we have lots of stories about how our users are using Google in innovative ways. And probably the one that's my favorite that I'd like to share with you today is right on the manufacturing floor. So in our Milwaukee, Wisconsin facility in the United States, it's home to about 1,000 of our employees, and we make standby generators there. So soon after we had Google Live, they realized that they could use Google on the shop floor. So all the manual and paper-based systems that they had today, they decided to load up into Google Drive so they had instant access to them, and then they put monitors right on the shop floor so they could have instant access to all those documents.
Wow. And tell us a little bit more about how that was done before.
Sure. Well, before they used the manual-based processes, they would fill out the checklist for the day. People would come around and collect them. So what they did instead was they first put up a Google site, and then they loaded in the Google site, in Drive folders, every single assembly that they make, and they put in such things as those manufacturing instructions, the quality checklists, how-to videos for the assemblers, as well as all the just sequencing of the schedule for the day. And so now They have not only immediate access to the latest information from a quality perspective to make sure they're doing the right things, but also that productivity of changing and sequencing on the fly. It's very helpful for them. But really for me, the best part, and for our IT group, is that we didn't even know this happened. We stumbled upon it when we were touring the shop floor, and we noticed that it had happened. And it's because we didn't have to whiteboard it. We didn't have a project request or go through the red tape of approvals like you probably have at your shop as well, Scott. So it was great because it was just having those great tools and having the people on the floor see that opportunity to innovate and having empowerment of management to do it. And so that's really what we're seeing across our company, is that sort of attitude of collaboration and spontaneous innovation really spreading across our company and helping to transform our business. And we really trace that back to the use of Google Cloud technologies.
Great. Brent Hoag of Briggs and Stratton, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Brent's going to rejoin us in just a few minutes for a roundtable Q&A. So again, if you have a question, please log in and enter it at the bottom of your screen. But I want to take a moment before we get to Scott and start talking about your company. Let's just look at a quick video clip just to give us a better idea.
At the foundation of all great brands lies a simple concept, a promise. What is our promise? To help consumers create and enjoy an outdoor space where they can celebrate with friends and family, play tag with their kids, or fetch with the dog, where they can grow gardens that are both beautiful and plentiful. That promise is the foundation of our vision, to help people of all ages express themselves on their own piece of the earth. That expression could come from someone with decades of experience in the garden, or a 6-year-old planting a seed for the first time. All of these people are gardeners, and at Scott's Miracle-Gro, all of them are our consumers.
You know, Scott, Brent was talking about his experience of some of the work that the Milwaukee factory workers were doing, some of the technology. Has that been your experience at Scott's Miracle-Gro?
You know, it has. We went live with Google in January 2013. Our focus was implementing Gmail and Calendar to deliver substantial cost savings. As a CIOs, that's what we do, right, Brent? Since that time, we also supported the company by providing Google Apps and letting the company organically adopt the tools. In a nutshell, what I would tell any CIO is that the tools sell themselves. For example, at Scott's, we've now been live for about 20 months. We have about 8,000 users, and the last count was we had 523,589 documents being used. So just step back and think about that. We didn't roll that out. We just provided the tool, and they adopted it organically. So that doesn't surprise me. As human beings, we watch each other, and in the technology context, we try to figure out what other people are doing so we can be successful. It leads to success, breeding success, which then sets the stage for continuous improvement.
So can you give us an example of that?
Sure. Brent talked about the manufacturing side of the organization, so I'm going to take us over to sales.
Sure.
At Scott's, we have about 150 associates across sales, marketing, and finance who are located across 9 different offices in the U.S. who collaborate to make sales plans for our retail customers. These are the ones who sell you our products. One of the biggest pain points they used to have was centered around something that we call trade promotions. These are the television, radio, and print ads that are used to motivate consumers to go to a store and buy our products. Before Google, these 150 people across 9 locations had to routinely manage dozens and dozens of spreadsheets and lots of email to make this happen. So just think about the challenges you would have with that. So what we did to solve this problem is we used Google App Engine to build a low-cost database in the cloud. Now everyone can access and update their plans concurrently in just one place, and they always have the latest information available.
So you said low cost. Elaborate on that a little bit for us.
Sure. We have saved money in 2 ways. First, we avoided spending money for things we didn't need. So, you know, like Brent, have you ever had a vendor try to sell you something you just don't need?
Sure.
Well, before we started using Google, we were evaluating multi-million-dollar standalone packages to help us manage our trade promotions. Frankly, they were way over-featured for us. So we developed just the parts we really needed with Google tools and implemented them at a fraction of the cost. The second way we save money, I would say, is just by leveraging the low-cost and flexible Google tools. For example, about 9 months after we went live with Google, we partnered with our sales team and we developed a CRM app that helps our sales force increase sales and operate more efficiently. We programmed our first release in just 4 weeks. And guess how much it cost? Next to nothing. And it gets even better. About 5 months later, we were asked to integrate the trade promotions solution into the CRM app. So we looked into it, and from the time the request was made to the time it was in production, it just took 2 weeks. And again, it cost us next to nothing to do it.
And so what did this trades promotion app mean for your sales force?
Well, imagine you're a sales associate in Milwaukee. In an ideal world, you want a calendar that shows what products are being promoted so that you can work with a store manager, show him the upcoming ads, and influence him to add display space sequence with the timing of the promotions. Before Google, this was difficult because the team of 100 people I referenced earlier had so many pieces of information scattered in so many places.
I take it that's changed now?
It has. Not only do we have all trade promotions in one place, but it's now part of the CRM app. Our sales associates now, they can pull up every trade promotion in their region. Radio, TV, print, audio and video, it's all right there. All the content, all the schedules, everything they need to win.
So it took 2 weeks to get this up and running. What's been the reaction?
You know, this is the first time I've said this on camera. Boom. Okay. You know, our sales team absolutely loves it, and they're asking for even more features. In fact, you know, we're currently in the middle of rolling out our third release to our sales associates. This is part of the continuous improvement cycle I talked about earlier, but more importantly, it's a real-life example for our CIOs. Look, when Google asked me if I would share my thoughts today, I told them that I thought it had a very important story that CIOs need to hear. I know what it's like to be in their shoes evaluating solutions in this area. I was in their position just 3 short years ago. I recognize that most CIOs will hear about the many benefits that Google brings, such as cost savings and better collaboration. And all of that certainly has been true for Scott's. But when you think about the benefits more broadly, the big win is how you can leverage Google Apps, Google App Engine, and your existing systems to gain synergies to basically implement cheap, easy to use, and low-cost solutions that everybody basically loves, and you can implement them across your business enterprise and really keep your partners engaged. In my 27-year career, this is certainly the most compelling system offering I've ever seen.
Wow. I can hear the sharp pencils doing the math now.
And that's the boom, Julie.
Scott, thank you so much. I want to bring back Brent Hoag for our Q&A session. Scott, when you think about kind of the, let me start with you a little bit. And, it seems like with your trade promotion app that you've integrated into your CRM system that you built on App Engine, tell us a little bit about sort of the measurable results that you've had as a result of that.
Sure. So this is the interesting part. I mean, we just put that in about the June timeframe, and that's right as our peak sales timing was going down. So we've used it some, and what has actually taken place is what I described earlier. I mean, we have examples where sales associates took in their tablets, met with the store managers, and they said it was really cool that they could show the whole trade promotion, have them push the button, show them the TV ads coming up right there, and then leverage that to get the space. So we may not yet have the measurable results, but we certainly have a lot of examples, and this is going to be one of our focuses for next year to really leverage it further.
That's great. There seems to be, with this move to cloud technologies, this freeing up of IT resources. And so how do you see the role of the IT individual and employee in your organization changing?
Well, I think it's already changed in our company. So what we really do now, because technology is changing so rapidly, is we leverage our partnerships and true partnerships with companies like Google who have the great technology so that we can focus not on the implementation or the technology part of that solution, but working with our customers to really leverage that technology for the benefit and value of our business.
That's great. And so maybe a question, a couple folks that we've been getting some questions online, so let me ask a few of those. So other than Google Docs, are you planning to adopt anything else around collaboration like wikis? Maybe we can start with you, Scott.
So, some of the things that have been used, or something Brent referenced earlier, we have the business groups leveraging Google Sites just on their own. I think the last count was we had about 110 sites. And again, this is a case where our IT department provided, basically only support as requested. The other thing is we see people using Google Communities to collaborate within their functions or across functions. And so, we just see continued adoption, just leveraging all the different suites.
That's great. Anything for you, Chad?
We're seeing the same thing, actually. It's the same model that the sites and the docs are really used across the company and external even to with our partners. But it's the communities that are really generating a lot of interest because it's specialized or it's a niche for the users and saying, I want to learn about what's happening across the globe or within the sector. So it's really virtualizing the worlds of people that are in either finance or engineering or whatever teams have the communities. We even use them for support purposes so that people can get their quick answer to their question, maybe from a colleague rather than calling our help desk.
Very interesting. So how to best convert offline doc thinking staff to an online collaborative thinking group?
Right. So that is a challenge, right? It's a change management issue. And really it's about having people understand that a collaborative environment with one document and one source is so powerful for the organization rather than the traditional way of making a copy or perhaps a spreadsheet where I send it to you and I send it to you, Scott, as well, and maybe 20 other people and asking you to return results. So it's really the power of collaboration and sharing and having that virtual work that can happen 24/7 also. So for us, it's a change management, having people understand that power and what it can do for them is the key to making that transformation.
Yeah, we found that, take just like a budget process. Think of how many different people have to provide inputs and coordinate that. When you're using, more traditional methods, that just takes a lot of sharing back and forth and trying to keep things straight. Whereas when you just have everything in one place and everybody's using it, it just goes fast and seamless. So when other people learn about that, they're asking, how do I do the same thing? And so I found if you just give it time, it's not something you really have to worry about too much. People will get moved towards that direction in time.
Yeah, totally agree. So switching to the cloud is daunting. How did Google help you provide a pathway to do that?
It is for users especially. They want to understand that leveraging the cloud is really about the power of understanding that you can work anywhere. That's probably the best message around the cloud is I can work anywhere and it works seamlessly with my work and my life.
That's great. Brent, Scott, I just want to thank you guys so much for being here today.
Great. Thank you.
My next guest has a story about how technology was at its best when the weather in his region was at some of the worst in memory. Brandon Williams handles Google Apps for Government for the state of Colorado. Brandon, welcome to Atmosphere Live. Brandon, can you hear me? You're muted, Brandon. We're just having trouble hearing you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, welcome.
All right. Thank you, Julie. So I wanted to kick off my chat with just a couple of pictures. This is a scene from the massive flooding that struck Colorado around this time last year. The waters covered the entire Front Range, causing more than $3.3 billion in damage and $556 million in economic loss. More than 18,000 people were evacuated, 16,000 homes were damaged, and around 1,900 homes were completely lost. And this is part of a website that we created to respond to the event called Colorado United. It was designed to be able to provide people who were affected by the flood to guidance for where the safest routes out were, where to find shelter, and how to connect with their loved ones.
Yeah, this is really interesting. And, as you've said in other venues, launching a website isn't new. And designing it for any device, from phones to tablets, it's pretty common.
Yeah, that's right. I think what's extraordinary and what set this apart was how quickly we were able to do it. We built this site in less than 24 hours and, at very little cost. I think, too, what's really important about it was for the first time, we were able to gather information not just from the state level, but also integrate information into the maps from the local and the federal level. And what happened was that it became the go-to source not just for people who were affected by the flood, but also for first responders as well as the media. And what we were really doing was what we all want to do, is be agile and responsive. And we did it all within the entire Google app set. So today I want to just go over 3 different points. 1, how we rolled out this site quickly and efficiently. 2, how that effort is changing our culture here at the state to one that demands new technology instead of resisting it. And 3, how our work with Google has given us a new litmus test that we apply to all new technologies. So the reason that we were actually able to launch Colorado United as quickly as we did is that we already had the code in place. In fact, we'd already paid for it. What we built it upon and what you're looking at now is the site build for tobacco-free Colorado. We used this site as a template, and when the need came up for the Colorado United site, we simply used the code behind this site for the template for the flood recovery. Now, for those of you who actually have to pay for things, there's 2 important points here. First, the development of the original site, the Tobacco-Free Colorado, was about 1/10 the cost of the highest RFP that we received. 1/10. Second, because the Google Sites is now part of our Google contract, there were no extra costs for us to create, host, maintain, or manage the site. No extra cost to integrate the Google Maps, no extra cost to integrate Google Groups, and no additional cost to integrate the emergency management information into that. So if we had to do this from scratch going back, it would have taken us weeks, or we would have gone outside and potentially spent $100,000 to get something like that done. Instead, it took a weekend, and at no additional cost, the ability to use those templates and use that existing code kind of brings me to my second point, which is building a culture of innovation. Instead of that traditional model where we outsource the website development, where the partner owns the site, you've now locked yourself into maintenance fees. We own that code. We develop the content, and we have a set of tools that are easy enough for non-technical staff to put into play and use. As a result, agents are starting to look together, and they're starting to look to each other and embrace the idea that they can build on each other's efforts and get the kind of systems that they really want. I think into the earlier question about cost savings, we now have around 405 Google sites. Both internal and external, as well as major campaigns that are being run in Google Sites. We just finished a top-to-bottom assessment of those 405 sites and did a cost comparison about how we did the process previously. And what we concluded was that we engaged in cost avoidance of around $2.4 million by reusing the code in this way. I mean, in other words, we would have had to spend $2.4 million to get these sites that now we're just building on a regular basis using our own templates. So the last point that I want to make is actually around that collaboration. Whether it's sharing a document or sharing the code, that's now the litmus test that we apply to all new technologies. We want to know, can it help us work together more efficiently and effectively? And I think a really good example of this is actually what we're doing today, Google Hangouts. We use it obviously as an online video conference. You can start one in just a couple of clicks. You can do screen sharing. You can share documents, and you can get things done very quickly. When we had our flooding last year, we actually used Google Hangouts to coordinate and communicate between the incident command centers and the field operators.
And have you found that the use of Hangouts has spread as well?
That we have. Not only were they used in the flood recovery, but now they're being integrated into daily business. We use them to host question and answer sessions between citizens and public health experts. We use them to host fireside chats between our senior leadership, our executive directors, and their entire staff that are located across Colorado. I think one of the exciting areas that it's growing is in the use of technical training, so that we can actually train people at their desks rather than having to ask them to drive across the state or to go to central training centers. And in Colorado, that's a good thing because of the snow and ice. And I think, that's really what gets us excited. I think in government, we're at our most productive whenever we've got more time to serve the taxpayers. And I think our work with Google has clearly made us more productive across a large number of fronts. It's made us more cost efficient, and it's transforming our culture into one where we're really getting the best out of that technology for the people that we serve.
Well, that's really interesting what you've done in Colorado. So let me ask you a couple questions in the time that we have left. And I also want to remind our listeners that they can type questions into the bottom of their screen, and we'll get to those as we can. But let me start off by, what sort of response have you gotten from the public in Colorado after the websites that you've launched?
Yeah, I think particularly around Colorado United, we drew heavily upon the use of Google Maps, and we all look up driving directions and restaurants in our personal lives using Google Maps, and I think it was really interesting and important to see how we use the information from the flood recovery, pushing it into a Google Maps environment, and then conveying that message in the same exact tools that we're normally used to using to do stuff. I think that was a very powerful way of communicating, and those maps spoke in ways that press releases and traditional communications can't.
That's great. And so what advice do you have for other government agencies or companies that are thinking of moving to the cloud?
Right. So we learned a number of lessons in the effort of getting the state on Google Apps for Government. And I think one of the chief amongst those was that when we first started out, I think like most organizations, we looked to Google Apps for Government primarily for email, for calendar, and for that kind of first phase implementation. I think what we found was that as we went on, embracing the entire Google Apps suite, including Docs and Drive, including Maps, including the other elements of the App Suite, really made life a lot easier, not just for our users, but as we were sharing information between agencies and building that kind of collaborative environment. I think it, like the other organizations already have mentioned, we saw a burst of innovation and creativity from our employees that I'm not, it's been very, very heartening to see.
That's great. We're going to close this portion with a clip that I think really represents how hard Colorado had to work to recover and how well that work is growing. Brandon Williams, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
If you look at all the response of the entire state to those floods, it has been real time. From CDOT getting the roads open by December 1st, beating it a couple days, to trying to make sure that we can get that people's homes cleaned out, and looking at the volunteers, the number of people that helped us, amazing.
Well, of course, Lyons, Colorado was one of the most devastated communities that we saw as a result of the flooding last year. I mean, so much was damaged. All the infrastructure, when that rain was coming down, we couldn't even reach anybody here, even by phone. We couldn't get any vehicles in here. But what we've seen already, just a year later, is the incredible work that's gone on around restoration, and the level of collaboration that we've seen in this community has really been very impressive.
These are a great example of really what it is that makes Colorado different, of people coming together and really figuring out how do we get it done and then doing it.
So we've heard from CIOs across the spectrum, manufacturing, consumer products, government, all of whom are making fundamental changes to their IT operations and seeing incredible innovation and creating a culture of innovation as a result. But to help make sense of these changes at a big picture level, I'm happy to be joined by CIO of Google, Ben Fried.
Hey, Julie, it's great to be here.
Great. So just a few questions for you. So, how does a CIO create a culture that supports innovation?
It's a great question, and I think one of the things that you need to realize is that what we've discovered is that innovation means something different to everyone. So you first have to start out by defining for your organization, for your team, what you think it means. And the way I try to define it for my team when we think about what innovation is ultimately it's about using technology to differentiate the enterprise, our enterprise, right? And differentiation could be competitive differentiation, but it can also be cultural differentiation. I think that the really important thing that happens in IT is when people who are technology experts but are seated inside their enterprise and deeply understand it, apply their expertise in technology to advance their company, right? To advance their enterprise, to do new things.
That's really interesting. And so, can you give us some examples of how Google is using technologies as the backbone to support sort of its own business needs?
So that's a really interesting story, I'll tell you, that I think illustrates this pretty well. So, and this is an example of thinking about differentiation in a broad sense. So, the audience might not know this, but Google is a video conferencing company. We're a place, the culture is video conferencing. I'm sure you know this.
I do know that, yes.
And in fact, a desk phone is optional at Google, right? You have to ask for one to get one. Of course, if you want one, you'll get one right away. We don't hold them back, but most people don't want them.
Yeah, I haven't had a phone actually for a few years now.
Yeah, you discover a lot of people use the phone jack to actually is just a jack for another computer or something like that. They don't even, the phone just sits there idle. So, but one of the things is video conferencing is so required, so ubiquitous. Every room has to have a video conferencing unit in it. And the way the company works together is completely through video conferencing. If you step back and think about it, it makes sense. We all work in teams. Our teams are distributed. Googlers work in hundreds and hundreds of buildings across many dozens of locations scattered across virtually every time zone in the world. And video is just such a better way of working together than audio or audio conferencing would be. But what we noticed was we were spending a lot of money on video conferencing, and actually when you look under the covers at what a video conferencing unit does, it's not that special, right? If you look at what a personal computer does, like the cost of goods of those video conferencing units was way lower than the bills that we were paying. And when we looked around at Google, and this was an example of, I think, great innovation that I'm really proud of, that my team and a number of other collaborator teams at Google helped with, is we realized that actually we had all the parts to do something much better, right? We had Google Video Chat, which became Hangouts, right? And we had the ability to share docs and share it remotely with people. And we had teams of really skilled engineers who could take commodity video cameras and commodity PCs and microphones and big flat screen TVs and turn them into a video conferencing system. And that's exactly what they did. We built a custom video conferencing system for Google, which has gone into every Google room. We have over 9,000 of these things in the company right now, which is just crazy.
It's crazy.
If you told me before I joined Google that I would be presiding over, one of the largest deployments of video conferencing in any enterprise in the world, I would have said, "What? Like that's the CIO's job, really?" But actually, it's been this amazing source of innovation for us, and a real point of pride. People come into the company and they talk about how impressive it is and how great it is that they can collaborate through video with people when it wasn't what they were used to. And the product was so successful internally, actually, that it's become this product, Chromebox for Meetings, which we now sell through Google for Work.
So, you must talk to a lot of other CIOs. And so I'm just really kind of curious, what do you hear are their biggest challenges in, adopting to some of these transformative technologies?
So there are many, many challenges. One thing, you and I haven't talked about this much before, I think, but one of the things that I think is a big change, and when we talk about the way, I think the interesting thing about this period that we're in the history of technology right now is the pace of change continues to increase, right? And now literally two guys in a bedroom can build an application that will be used by 1 million people the next day, right? And so the pace of change is incredibly, incredibly fast. And I think that one of the things that's been a real secret weapon for us as an IT shop inside Google has been having great technical support people, right? That the ability to do change management at scale in your enterprise is incredibly important. I think traditional IT shops approach change as a very hard and complicated thing, right? It's very, very hard to get people, honestly, of my generation, to use new tools, right? We kind of use a tool set, and it's easy for us to become a little set in our ways. And building up a technical support team, an IT team that knows how to roll out new technologies and bring change to your organization really, really rapidly is incredibly important. With the pace of technology change throughout the landscape, throughout the the enterprise, throughout the industry, we can't rely on the old cycles of change management yet, which means that you have to have great tech support people. If your tech support people need a list of frequently asked questions, and answers to roll out the next technology, if they can't do it, if they can't understand how the next thing works and figure out how to help people solve problems on their own, you'll never be able to move at the pace of change that the actual technology industry is moving at, and you'll always lag. And so I think a bit of secret sauce for any, if I'm allowed to use the phrase secret sauce for any enterprise is to invest deeply in super skilled technology support people who can roll out changes to your organization, to the technology of your organization, at the speed that the technology industry can deliver them.
So, one of the questions that was submitted was asking, what's the most exciting thing about the role of the CIO over the next 10 to 20 years? How do you see that changing?
So there's so many things. It's hard to choose. It's hard to choose. I think that as I said earlier, I've been doing IT for 30-something years in one form or another, and I can't remember a time when there was so much change at such a rapid pace in so many different parts of the technology landscape. So, it's not just that mobile is moving super fast, or that data is moving super fast, or cloud is moving super fast. Those and 10 other topics are all moving at incredible speed. And I think that that's what makes the next 5 or 10 years of the technology landscape, I think, really incredible, that we're going to have more opportunity than we ever had before. I think the thing that's great for IT organizations in all of this is that, I'm going to try out a new analogy on you, so I hope this works for you and the audience, is that in the old days of enterprise IT, the software industry that supported and the technology industry that supported enterprise had to go to ultimately a rather small customer list to produce the revenue that generated the R&D that built the products those enterprises needed. And I don't mean to use an ugly or offensive example, but that said, I think it was kind of like when we look at how, submarines had $5,000 ashtrays and $8,000 toilets and $15,000 VCRs, right? When the enterprise needed to get custom technology that would only serve this relatively small segment, what ended up happening is we paid a premium for it.
Right.
And we had to be the drivers of innovation. And I think it's actually great for IT organizations and for CIOs right now that there's so much innovation happening in the consumer landscape that we get to be the beneficiaries of. We don't have to write the checks to pay for the R&D and the innovation that's creating these technologies that we can use to revolutionize our enterprises. This has been true. A lot of CIOs I talk to have commented on this over the last 5+ years, but I think we'll see it increase by an order of magnitude in significance, and it'll mean that IT shops get to focus more, that it means you can be, you don't have to be masters of all trades, but you can focus really on the problems that matter for your own enterprise far more than you ever could before.
You mentioned mobile a few minutes ago, and I'm curious how sort of the influx of mobile is changing your role and the role of IT and CIOs.
So this is, I think, mobile is it is this incredible opportunity that we are all still figuring out, right? But the numbers speak for themselves. We've had smartphones now for something like 7-8 years. We've had personal computers for a little bit over 30 years. There's an equal number of the two in the world right now, right? And if you think about where the next users of the internet and of technology will be, they'll be in places where they will buy smartphones, right? They will be using smartphones. They're not going to be getting a computer with a separate screen and a keyboard and a mouse. In fact, they may never see such devices in their lives. So this is a case of the consumer technology landscape fundamentally altering the terms with which we as IT shops and CIOs engage with our customers, our users, our employees. And I think we've just begun. I mean, if you look at, so I think the great opportunity is, the great question is, how do we create mobile native, mobile centric workforces and do it in ways that don't feel like we tried to cram the 19-inch screen of information into a 4-inch screen, right? And we require everyone to have monocles or some crazy thing so they can figure out how to use their smartphone and get stuff done. Like, that's a terrible idea, and I'm not proposing it. I think the great opportunity that lies ahead is understanding how to use the sensors, the form factor, the always on, the always connected, almost always connected, but then the online, offline hybrid connectivity of the smartphone to solve enterprise problems, understanding that these are devices everyone will already know how to use, right? You don't have to have an IT shop that's invested in teaching people how to use a smartphone, right? They already know how to use it. You can shed that responsibility, but we all have to tilt our mindsets to thinking about solving our enterprise problems with these devices, with these sensors, with these form factors. And if I may say to my peers in the industry right now, I still think we have a ways to go. I haven't seen very many great enterprise-centric apps on a smartphone.
For a mobile device.
People are still thinking in the era of personal information management. They're not thinking about really lighting up the enterprise.
So, Google has expanded into new business areas. I think a couple of examples: self-driving cars, the acquisition of Nest earlier this year. How has the IT role changed in your organization as Google's sort of expanding into areas that are different than what it's done before?
So Google's constant growth and expansion has been this constant source of wonder for me over the last 6.5 years in my role. And I was telling my team, we had a town hall meeting for my entire organization a few weeks ago, and I was telling my team that after a bit of thought, I had realized that virtually all the problems that we had been dealing with over the last 6.5 years were somehow problems driven by growth, right? Growth in scope, growth in domain, growth in number of employees. And I feel incredibly lucky to be able to be at a company where growth is a problem, right? Let me just say I recognize and I understand how privileged I am and how privileged we are to be in that position. But that doesn't mean that those challenges are any less significant just because the problems you want to have. They are really, really big problems. I think that there's an awful lot of work in keeping up with a company that keeps on adding on to the list of things it's going to be great at. And the thing that I've really been impressed with is about how Google's approach to things like hiring and staffing. And I think this is something that is actually a universal. Great talent, great people are this incredible. They are the workforce, but they're also the workforce multiplier. When you discover people who have potential and who can do so much more, you're able to grow with and keep up with the change in the company. So it's been this wild, crazy ride keeping up with a company that has ambitions in all kinds of amazing areas. While any set of problems can get you down if you think about how much work you have to do, when you think about what those problems are, what it means you get to do as a result, I think that's awesome. It's only from hard problems that great things occur, right? And so bring on the hard problems, right? That's how we'll do great things.
Great. So, is Google making any plans to use their sophisticated search technology to automate records management for content and Google Apps? There was a question about, for example, things like records, people, places, transactions to support decision making, archives, e-discovery. Can you share your thoughts on that?
Wow, was this person a spy or something like that? It's a great question because I have a team that's been working closely with the Google for Work team on exactly this class of problem. What we observed was that honestly, the classical approach to enterprise search was, it was petering out. And we thought about, well, why is it petering out? And part of it is because enterprises, in one way or another, their data is no longer within their four walls. Problem number one, right? You use SaaS providers of one sort or another, or service providers that are outsourced service providers that aren't really SaaS, but your data is living outside your four walls, or using Google Apps or something like that. So the ability of traditional premises search software to search within your enterprise was becoming vastly more limited. Meanwhile, we had 15 plus years of amazing technology innovation coming into making sense of the knowledge present in the World Wide Web. And a lot of that innovation had taken place at Google. There's this thing called the knowledge graph, which creates awareness of the semantics of knowledge, and it's this really, really rich knowledge, which is very much applicable to problems within the enterprise as well. And so this team of mine, working with a team in the Google for Work team, we've set this objective for ourselves, which is that we think that enterprise search for Google, if we look at harvesting the tools and the techniques and the intellectual property that was developed by the Google Search and Google Knowledge teams, and combine that with our knowledge of the enterprise and how it works, this is a pretty bold bet, I think. I hope I'm not getting ahead of my blocking here, but we think that we can produce search with better customer satisfaction, better user satisfaction for the enterprise than you can for the internet, which is actually, that's never been the case before. It's always been the case that, you know, a Google search customer satisfaction was the gold, the platinum, the diamond standard for what you could do, and that search within the enterprise was good enough. I think we can actually invert that if we take advantage of all that we know about the enterprise and combine it with all the innovation that's taken place to make that internet search so good. And we can do it in a way that's completely safe and secure and private to the enterprise. So, you know, give us another year or so, and hopefully I'll come back and we'll talk about the results that we're seeing.
Sounds great. So just to wrap up, you know, you're in a very unique position. You're responsible for an IT organization at the forefront of a highly technical, incredibly innovative company. Everything that, you know, we do or I do on a personal basis is done in the cloud.
Yeah.
And so for, you know, any of our audience today who maybe hasn't quite made the shift to starting to do work or big work in the cloud, what advice can you leave them with, or sort of how to start? What would be a first step for those folks to take?
I guess the first piece of advice is it's actually not as hard as you probably think it is. The reality is that chances are most of your people are using the cloud already, and what you're actually going to be doing is you're going to be helping them end the schizophrenia that's been caused by using a tool set for the enterprise that's completely divergent from their personal tool set. So the first part of adoption of the cloud is that if you think it may be hard, you think it may be an insurmountable change management problem, but I have never spoken to an enterprise that did not find the change management was better and easier than they thought. So number one, it's not as bad as you think. Number two is the reason in the end it'll make your enterprise better, and you should do it for that. You should also do it because it will make your team's job so much better. Moving problems to the cloud means moving them out of your mind, and it means that you can do less in a way that actually lets you deliver way more in the areas that are much, much, much more important for your enterprise and your organization than these problems that can be solved in the cloud. Every time, and we still do this when we move problems from a premises problem to a cloud problem, it's like this little burden has been taken off my shoulders and my team's shoulders, and it's that much more focus that I get to put on differentiating Google and making Google be the best place to work and making Googlers be the most productive people in the world, right?
That's great. Well, that brings us to the close of this session. I want to thank you and all of our guests, and thank you for joining us. This session will be available for playback on YouTube in case you missed anything. In the meantime, I'm Julie Pearl, and have a great day.